out there. So the landscape we've now built in the UK is data.gov.uk. It's more than 5,000 data sets released. London Data Store is more than 500. The only thing you need to know about this line here is that the Prime Minister knows what open data is. Okay? That's the most important lesson here. The Prime Minister wrote a letter, did a podcast about open data. Extraordinary times. I had to pinch myself. I thought, this can't be happening. But then I knew it was serious. Every ministry has a transparency board. I'm on the Department of Transport Transparency Board. And it's quite incredible to see, you know, very serious, high-level power structures engaging with this. And they really do believe it. And as SMEs, we're trying our very hardest to deliver on the vision and the belief that they have. We have a growth review going on for our budget this autumn. Open data is one of only 6 areas that are being featured nationally across all sectors as major growth poles. So this is now moving really fast. It's moving at light speed, actually, in the government, in the UK. There's now a government proposal, and this would be of interest to a few public sector agencies here. Once you have data, once you have data in lots of different agencies, and the data is actually all the same stuff, well, why have you got all the agencies? Because they've all got overheads and CEOs and, you know, premises, etc. All the data can all be brought together in one agency, can't it? Why not? So that's what the government's doing in the UK. We're creating a public data corporation. And now the fight is about what should its charging model be? Because it would be ironic, wouldn't it, to have all the core reference data right in the middle, surrounded by a huge landscape of open data releases, but in the middle it will be charged for. Massive political battle going on in the UK at the moment. I've been blogging and writing about this, and we have a consultation that closes on the 27th of October about this public data corporation. People have said things like, you know, the ownership and the access and the universal access to this kind of data could be as big as universal suffrage in the long-term history of Western democracies. And I don't, you know, go into hyperbole. You can probably tell I'm from Yorkshire. You know, I don't generally go into hyperbole, but this is so significant. The way in which it's forcing government to re-examine itself, to restructure its processes. Cost is being stripped out. We've discovered all sorts of mistakes, double purchasing, you know, contracts, you know, zombie contracts that shouldn't be there. You know, we've exposed by this process of asking for the data. So this is big stuff. So the implications are that, this is the last slide, end of state monopoly over information. That is how we're presenting it and arguing it from the SME point of view. If you have the information, you originate it, you develop it, you keep it. We need you to continue doing that. But you're losing your monopoly. Now that means that we need to accept that there are going to be multiple versions of the truth and multiple views on the truth. And that's troubling for many people in the public sector. So imagine you're a transportation agency. Who's now telling the people on the transport network what to do in the case of a breakdown or you know, a terrorist alert or something of that kind? Is it the apps or is it us? Well, it's us, obviously. The apps are, you know, don't have a synoptic view. Actually, I have to tell you, the data is already out there. The game is now working with the app developers to get the right messages out, to be open with the app developers, so that actually the app developers and what the public sector wants to say at any critical time are aligned. Because you can't put the data back in the box anymore. So we have to think about that. Data is 21st century digital infrastructure, as our public data corporation is starting to illustrate. But you can't have that open data windfall without the core reference data, and that is a challenge as to how that's going to be paid for. Of course, if you strip out government-to-government trading, and you strip out business development that government might not be doing, if it released just the raw data, you can get the cost of the government cost right down. And then it might be an infrastructure investment you can afford. Contractors also have to release data. It's interesting, I wrote this slide before the Lord Mayor's comments. Somebody sent me, well in fact a London developer wanted to add Dublin cycle hire to his site. And he said, oh, you're going to Dublin, I see. Here's the takedown notice that I had from JC Deco when I put the data up on the site. And I only tell you this because of the glorious footnote in this email from the person saying, we will legally threaten you, you must take away the data, blah, 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 blah. Right at the bottom he said, P.S. I have to admit, your site's really nice. And I just thought, this is the madness that comes from these situations. So, finally, government as a platform. Where's the boundary between the state and the private sector? We've got to put our heads together and think about the right place for that boundary to be. Should the government make the platform and the scalable distribution, or should the government just pass out one copy and allow the private sector to do all of that? It's a very big question. And citizens, of course, are going to become data literate through apps. Somebody asked the question earlier on, how do we engage people? Well, they consume apps. Smartphones are going to take over. Every phone will be a smartphone within a couple of years. And people have an enormous thirst for apps. And those apps, as they drill down through the App Store, will cover their neighbourhood, will cover their commute, will cover their school, will cover all aspects of their life. And that's how they consume the data. As we've seen from sort of the business model I showed you, that's only a tip of the iceberg, and there are going to be other processes behind that. But nonetheless, we have to recognise that. So I'm finishing with a bullet point that has a full stop at the end of it. And that's simply to say that if SMEs come in, if you release the data, if you follow through on this agenda, genuinely, a power shift will occur, brackets, for the better. Thank you very much.